They told you Malaysian food was just a mix of Chinese, Indian, and Malay influences. But they never told you that what happens when those three traditions collide in one grandmother's kitchen is something greater than any of its parts. They never told you that Malaysia produced one of the most complex and layered food cultures on earth precisely because it refused to keep those influences separate. What this grandmother knows, and what she has never been asked to explain, because in her kitchen it simply goes without saying, is the accumulated wisdom of three civilizations held together by spice. 1. Nasi Lemak, the coconut rice that became a national identity. Ask a Malaysian what their national dish is. Every single one will say the same thing, Nasi Lemak, and then every single one will tell you that their grandmother's version is the best. Rice cooked in coconut milk with pandan leaves and a little salt, fragrant, slightly rich, each grain separate and gleaming. Served with sambal, a cooked chili paste with dried anchovies, onions, and tamarind that is simultaneously sweet, spicy, and sour in a balance so precise it takes years to master. Alongside, half a hard-boiled egg, fried anchovies crisped until they shatter, roasted peanuts, and sliced cucumber, wrapped in banana leaf for the street version, served on a plate for the home version. The banana leaf version tastes better. The leaf infuses the rice as it steams. Nasi lemak is a Malay dish at its origin. It predates Malaysian statehood and has been eaten along the western coast of the peninsula for centuries. But it has been adopted and adapted by Malaysian Chinese and Malaysian Indian communities so completely that it now belongs to all of them. The sambal varies by ethnicity, the accompaniments vary by region, the grandmother varies by household. The one constant is the coconut rice, the sambal, and the understanding that this is not just breakfast, it is belonging. This grandmother's sambal is made from a recipe she learned at 14 from her own grandmother, who learned it from hers. The ratio of dried chilies to fresh, the amount of tamarind, the precise moment to add the anchovies. She has never written any of it down. She does not need to. She made it so many times before she understood it consciously that the understanding is now physical, not intellectual. In 2009, a diplomatic controversy erupted when an Indonesian newspaper described nasi lemak as an Indonesian dish, prompting significant Malaysian outrage. The dish became a flashpoint for national identity in a way that almost no other food has. When a country fights over who owns a plate of coconut rice and sambal, you understand how deeply food and identity are braided together. It was never just rice. It was a grandmother's way of telling you, this is who we are. This is where we come from. Eat. 2. Rendang, the dry curry that takes all day and cannot be hurried. There is a Malaysian saying, if your rendang is finished in 2 hours, it is not rendang. It is a mistake. Rendang is beef, traditionally tough cuts like chuck or shin that benefit from long cooking, braised in coconut milk with a spice paste of lemongrass, galangal, ginger, shallots, garlic, and dried chilies, cooked over low heat for 3 to 5 hours until all the liquid has evaporated and the coconut milk has separated and the solids have fried in their own coconut oil until dark and caramelized and intensely fragrant. The result is not a saucy curry, it is almost dry. Each piece of beef coated in a thick, dark, complex paste that has the concentrated flavors of every ingredient that went into it, reduced to their essence. Rendang originates with the Minangkabau people of West Sumatra, brought to the Malay Peninsula through centuries of migration and trade. It was traditionally made for important ceremonies and celebrations. As a preservation technique, the long cooking and low moisture content meant rendang could keep for weeks without refrigeration, making it practical for long journeys or large gatherings. The more you cook it, the longer it lasts. The longer it lasts, the deeper the flavor. Patience is not incidental to Rendang. Patience is the recipe. This grandmother makes Rendang for Hari Raya, the celebration at the end of Ramadan, every year without exception. She starts at 6 in the morning. She expects to finish by noon. She is never finished by noon. She finishes when the Rendang tells her it is done, which is when the oil separates. The paste is dark, and the smell has shifted from sharp to deep. She cannot explain precisely when that moment arrives. She just knows it. In 2011, Rendang was voted the most delicious food in the world by CNN's audience poll. 40,000 people from around the world agreed on one dish. That dish had been made by Minangkabau and Malay grandmothers for centuries before anyone thought to ask for a global opinion. It was never just dry curry. It was a lesson in what food becomes when you refuse to rush it. 3. Laksa, the noodle soup that is different everywhere and perfect everywhere. Laksa is not one dish. It is a family of dishes spread across Malaysia and Singapore and Indonesia, each version claiming to be the original and each version being entirely right. Curry laksa, the version most familiar to the Western palate, is a rich, spiced coconut milk broth poured over thick rice noodles, topped with prawns, fish cake, tofu puffs, bean sprouts, and a dollop of sambal. The broth is built from arempa, a spice paste of dried chilies, lemongrass, galangal, shrimp paste, and candle nuts, fried in oil until fragrant, then combined with coconut milk and prawn stock. Assam laksa from Penang replaces the coconut milk with tamarind water and uses mackerel, creating something sour and sharp and entirely different from the coconut version. The two are so different that calling them both laksa is almost confusing, except that both are extraordinary and both are recognizably Malaysian. Laksa is a Peranakan dish at its origin. Peranakan culture emerged from the intermarriage of Chinese traders with local Malay communities beginning in the 15th century, creating a hybrid culture with its own language, customs, and cuisine. Peranakan cooking, also called Nyonya cooking, is the direct result of two cultures sharing kitchens for generations, and it is one of the most complex and distinctive regional cuisines in the world. This grandmother is Nyonya. Her great-grandmother was the daughter of a Hokkien merchant and a Malay woman. Her laksa recipe is 4 generations old, adapted and refined with each generation. She considers it neither Chinese nor Malay. She considers it hers. The spice paste she makes from scratch takes an hour and uses 12 ingredients. She has tried the jarred versions. She opened them, smelled them, and poured them away. It was never just noodle soup. It was 400 years of two cultures deciding that what they made together was better than anything they had made apart. 4. Roti Canai, the flatbread that made mornings worth waking up for. At 5:30 in the morning at a Malaysian mamak, the Indian Muslim food stalls that are open at all hours and serve as the social heart of Malaysian communities, the Roti Canai man is already at work. The dough is stretched, thrown, folded, stretched again. The technique looks like theater. The result is transcendence. Roti Canai is a layered flatbread made from a dough of flour, water, fat, traditionally ghee, and a little egg, kneaded until elastic, rested overnight, then stretched so thin on an oiled surface that you can read through it, folded over itself multiple times to create layers, and cooked on a flat griddle until the outside is golden and blistered and the inside is soft and flaky and pulls apart in sheets. Served with dal curry for dipping, or with curry gravy, or with a plate of curry and sambal. Eaten with your right hand, tearing pieces and dragging them through whatever sauce is in front of you. Roti Canai was brought to Malaysia by South Indian Muslim immigrants, primarily Tamil and Telugu communities, who arrived during the British colonial period of the 19th and early 20th centuries to work on rubber plantations and in the railway system. They brought their bread traditions with them, adapted them to local ingredients and tastes, and over generations produced something that is now so embedded in Malaysian food culture that most Malaysians consider it simply theirs. The grandmother in this story does not make roti canai herself. She goes to the same mamak stall every morning and has for 30 years, and she considers the man who makes it there a greater expert than she will ever be. She is not too proud to recognize a master. She orders 2, plain, with dal, and a cup of teh tarik, pulled tea, sweet and frothy. And she has been doing this since she was a young woman, and will do it until she cannot. It was never just flatbread. It was the best reason Malaysia ever gave you to get up before sunrise. 5. Kuih, the sweet things that took a lifetime to learn. In Malaysia, kuih, the collective term for traditional bite-sized sweets and snacks, represents one of the most technically demanding and culturally rich areas of the entire cuisine. And the grandmother who makes kuih from scratch is revered in a way that no other cook quite is. Kuih encompasses hundreds of distinct preparations: kuih lapis, the layered steamed rice flour cake in alternating colors, built one thin layer at a time. Onde, pandan-flavored, glutinous rice balls filled with liquid palm sugar that burst in your mouth. Kuih seri muka, a 2-layer steamed cake of glutinous rice on the bottom and pandan custard on top. Putu piring, steamed rice flour cakes filled with palm sugar, sold from carts where the steam rises in columns that smell of pandan and nostalgia from 50 meters away. Kuih making requires precision of a specific kind, not the measuring cup precision of Western pastry, but the sensory precision of a cook who knows by the sound of the steamer, the color of the batter, the way the pandan custard pulls away from the side of the pan. These are skills that take years to acquire and a lifetime to master. The grandmothers who make kuih well are known for it. In their communities, their kuih is requested by name. The recipe is nominally available. The result is not transferable. This grandmother makes kuih for every family occasion and many ordinary Sundays. Her onde is the dish her grandchildren describe when they describe home. The liquid palm sugar center, gula melaka, dark and caramel rich, made from palm sap, bursts warm into the mouth when you bite through the pandan green exterior. It lasts for 1 second. Her grandchildren have been chasing that 1 second their entire lives. It was never just a sweet. It was a grandmother's most complete sentence. Everything she knew about flavor and technique and love held inside something the size of a marble. Coconut rice and sambal that became a national identity fought over at diplomatic levels. A dry curry that cannot be rushed and knows when it is done before you do. Noodle soup born from 4 centuries of 2 cultures deciding to share a kitchen. A flatbread stretched thin enough to read through, cooked on a griddle at 5 in the morning by a man who has been doing it his whole life. Sweet rice cakes where a grandmother's entire lifetime of skill is held inside something you can eat in a single bite. Malaysian food is what happens when a culture stops asking where an ingredient came from and starts asking what it can become. Chinese techniques, Indian spices, Malay aromatics, Peranakan ingenuity, Portuguese colonial traces, British colonial structures, all of it in one kitchen, in one grandmother's hands, producing something that belongs to Malaysia alone. The grandmothers who hold these techniques, who make Rendang from memory and Kuih by feel and Laksa Rempa from scratch, are not young. The knowledge they carry is not written down in any form that fully captures it. The transfer of that knowledge is never guaranteed. Every Kuih grandmother who stops cooking takes something with her that no recipe can entirely recover. Tell me in the comments, have you ever eaten Malaysian food? And if someone has made you something that you have been trying to recreate ever since, something from a grandmother or a market stall or a small restaurant in a city you have never been back to, tell me what it was, because that is the food this channel cares about most. Subscribe, because next time we go somewhere else, and the story is just as extraordinary.